So, to continue our discussion about human values that are given to us by nature's God through the nature of things, we have racial equality and human solidarity given to us by the nature of things. Now, we are products of DNA. Every human being is a creation, as we all know, of the genetic code. And when looking at the different races on this planet from the perspective of DNA, there is absolutely no justification whatsoever for members of one race to regard the members of any other race as being inferior in any way. Whatever genetic differences there are non-essential. So the ideal of racial equality, traditionally espoused on purely ethical terms, is now revealed as a fact of nature. Science comes along and shows us that racism has no basis in reality. So again, from what is genetic homogeneity to what ought to be racial equality. Now, religions have preached about human togetherness for millennia. How we are all one, brothers and sisters, children of one God or another. DNA tells us that every individual human being is very nearly genetically identical to any other human being. We are, in reality then, all members of the one human family. Particular religions usually confine togetherness within their own numbers and regard those of other religions as heathens, infidels, or mortal enemies, even. Science, however, tells us that our oneness is a universal reality. It is not pie in the sky idealism, but actual fact. Our genetic commonality runs deep, while the things that divide us are superficial and illusory. So again, from what is, we are all made in the image of the one and same genetic code given to us by nature's God, to what ought to be humankind united. Now, we all see each other as the one human family. Is not going to solve all our problems, families feud and fight and all that, but it's just that realization that we are one human family. Might go a long way into resolving a lot of our presumed conflicts. Now, science, as in seeing things as they are, can be a source of values. And again, the naturalistic fallacy is fatally disputed. What ought to be can be derived from what is. Now, there's also transcendence to consider in the natural realm. And transcendence was traditionally exclusively part of the metaphysical realm. But it is, as we shall see, common to the nature of things. Now, starting at what might be the end of a chain of natural events that manifest transcendence, we have consciousness. Consciousness is clearly a transcendence of the brain. It is something other than the brain, something other than flashing neurons and synaptic connections. There is no place in the brain where consciousness is found. It transcends the brain, transcends brain activity. The brain then is something more than the sum of its parts. Now, toward the beginning of this chain of transcendent natural events, we have the unimaginably extreme chaos of gluons and quarks. But even with all that chaos there, with the quarks and the gluons, there is a certain continuity. But I won't get into that. We have the quarks and gluons, which are inside the nucleon of an atom. The nucleus of an atom is formed by protons and neutrons, and they are made up of quarks and gluons, which are in this frenetic wrestling bout. The repellent quarks are constantly corralled by the attractive influence of gluons, or the strong force. And this wild and woolly imbroglio somehow transcends itself to produce a particle that is near infinite in its extreme stability. That's the proton. A proton is not the quarks and gluons that comprise it. It is something other, something entirely different. It is then most definitely a transcendence of quark-gluon activity. Now, life is a transcendence of DNA. DNA contains the information for the production of every life form, but life forms are not DNA. They transcend it and are much more than the sum of their parts. Now, also, the solidity that we experience is a transcendence of molecular space. As far as quantum particles that make up molecules are concerned, there is no such thing as solidity. The solid walls that we come up against might be the result of electromagnetism, creating a field of repulsion between us and other molecular structures, but nonetheless, it is transcendence from space to solidity. Now, not only do we have metaphysical traits found in the physical realm, we also have physical traits masquerading as spiritual concepts. For instance, the religious concept of immortality, eternal life. Now, the hope for immortality, religious people might say, is inseparable from the deepest nature of our souls. The hope for immortality is inseparable from the deepest nature of our souls. Now, I would agree with that if by the nature of our souls it is meant to be our basic instinct for self-preservation. For that is what the religion's promise of eternal life plugs into. A base instinct to preserve ourselves without bound. So, in contradiction to the belief that religion exists in a realm that lies beyond the physical and appeals only to the divine aspects of our being, reality tells us that the prospect of eternal life is inexorably tied to our basic instinct for survival. Now, religion uses the instinct for self-preservation just as it was once used in our primitive existence. When we, in order to survive in this world, in order to go on living in this world, we belong to a group. Must belong to a group to survive in the wild, the natural world, as primitives. To go on living in the next world, to gain eternal life, one must belong to a religion. And go along with that, with the religious practices and tenets. So in more primitive times, dependence on the group for one's survival meant putting the interests of the group above one's other self-interest so as to form cohesive groups. And in both instances, to belong to a religion, to belong to a primitive tribe, it was all about self-preservation. To belong to a tribe, about self-preservation. To belong to a religion is about self-preservation. Religions then are very much in league with the natural realm.